Okay, welcome back. What's our project today? Or at least, what's our project for the next few days? What I have here is a P407. It's a Chinese made reproduction, clone, whatever you want to call it, of the Tamiya Bruiser. You saw in my previous videos, I restored an original Bruiser. And as I was doing that, I was finding a lot of aftermarket parts here and there while I was looking for some of the vintage ones. And you know, I have a personal thing about putting reproduction or top-up parts on a vintage restoration, so I controlled myself. But I picked this up on eBay for a real good price. And I figure, well, here's my opportunity to play around with some of those modification and hop-ups that I want to do. These things are relatively inexpensive, so you know, and they're pretty close to the the original look and feel, and very affordable. They're more affordable than the re-release. You know, I have even an issue with the re-releases, but you can't beat the price on the P407. The model here. So anyways, let's get down to it. I already took out the side, whatever you call these things, the runners. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to end up doing a little bit to the body, and not to mention the fact that I've already ordered aftermarket aluminum ones. So we're going to be replacing the front bumper, the rear bumper, these with aluminum. And the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to take this cab. It's really funky, man. Why they made this chrome, I don't know. But we're going to take this cab out and we're going to replace it with a roll bar. We're going to redo the interior. And we're going to repaint this. Unlike the original Bruiser, you know, this doesn't have any logos on the side. We're going to deal with that as well. But the cool thing about this, wow, what happened to my voice there? The cool thing about this compared to the original Bruiser is that all the lights are made, basically ready to roll with for LEDs. So that's, that's the real nice thing about, I guess, the reproductions and the clones and stuff. They always kind of improve a little bit on the originals. But you got to understand the originals are from the 1980s. So anyways, we're going to go ahead and take this thing apart. So we got the body to deal with. The interesting thing also that I found, unlike the original Bruiser, is that this is a separate piece, the front bumper. So the front is one whole piece, and the bumper screws on to the front, which is kind of interesting. The original's not like that. The original, let's see if I can find an original front piece here. You can always go back to my restoration of, or go to my website to see all the restorations I've done for Bruisers in the past. But you can see the original bumper had the Toyota logo, but it was all one piece. So on these, the bumper is a separate piece that's tacked onto the front grille. So isn't that rather interesting? Anyways, the other thing is the plastic is different. This is more flexible. The original plastic was pretty hard, and this has just a lot more flex to it. Heard stories about the battery. Not sure if this is really lithium ion. Some people have taken it apart and it says lithium iron. So we're gonna probably replace this or check it out and see if this is really a decent battery or not, but it's very, very light. I will say that. The other thing I found interesting, the transmission on the original, there's 3 holes for you to put lubricant in. This is a sealed transmission. The motor on this, it looks like a 550 motor. On the original Tamiya's Bruisers, the motor was a lot bigger, maybe a 540. What else have we got here? The wheels are interesting. I'll probably 3D some adapters for 12 millimeter hex wheels. The interesting thing with these is on the original Bruiser there was a 4 millimeter nut, 3 or 4 millimeter nut, forgot which one, but anyways, that was exposed that goes here. These are held by 4 screws. The other is, man, this has a lot of slop to it. So anyways, there's some interesting things with this whole thing, but again, inexpensive. So we're going to tear this thing apart, replace the shocks. The shocks suck on this. Do something to the leaf springs, move the servo up front for the steering. The reason the servo, this box has the servos in it, and it includes the steering servo, and there's a long rod right here that controls the steering. And the reason for that is in the old days, in the 80s, the servos weren't waterproof. So the case here, the reason for it is to keep the water outside the servo. But nowadays we have waterproof servos, so we can put them externally, so we can move this long steering rod. I mean, if you consider that the servo over here turns the steering rod that turns this steering knuckle that makes the steering, there's just a prone to a lot of slop. So we'll take care of that as well while we're at it. But like I say, this was bought for a song. You can buy these inexpensively, a couple $100. It's a great project to build on. A lot of aftermarket parts are out there, and not as expensive as the original Bruisers. And if you're going to use it, then this is the way to go. If you just want a shelf queen, a vintage shelf queen, then you can pay 2 to 3 times more for the original Bruiser. But if you're going to use it, highly recommend this route. So let's start at it and start taking this thing apart and see what we're going to do with it. Okay, first things first. Let's go after the front bumpers, the wheels and tires, and let's get some of this stuff out of the way. We'll attack the body later. We'll start with the chassis right now. The nice thing about this is it also uses Allen heads instead of Phillips, which is kind of cool. But let's start. Yeah, even the wheels, Phillips or Allen head. Just make sure we got the right. There we go. All right, start going at this. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to make an adapter for these to put 12 millimeter hexes on, and it'll give us more options for the wheels that we can use later on. The other thing that's interesting is this frame is painted black. It's not powder coated or anything, because I can see some of the scratch marks from the linkages here. So maybe we'll touch up some of these scratches, but yeah, it's kind of interesting. I would have probably left it aluminum, but that's just me. The other thing that I noticed about these, or at least this model, I haven't owned a Tamiya re-release, so I'm not sure what they look like, but it looks like these parts here, the aluminum cases, the hubs, the axle cases, look like they're anodized to silver color. And the thing is that it's a rough texture to them, which I guess is fine. But the problem that I have with the finish on these things is they look plasticky. If you look at the rear axle, it just looks like a piece of plastic, and I just can't get into that. And there's flashing, a lot of flashing where the top and the bottom pieces meet here. So I don't know, I might buy an extra set, throw it in easy off oven cleaner, see if it takes some of this stuff off, and maybe see about polishing one of these, see if they polish up or not. I'm concerned about the type of metal being used, so it might not be prone to having a good polish. But anyways, that's another thing I've noticed. Hey, these shocks really have to go. I can even feel binding on them. And they have this weird spring here, which I have no idea what purpose that spring would serve, but I'm sure it just doesn't make things any better. So it's just and they also seem to leak because there's fluid all over the place here. Wow. Okay. Wow, these shocks, man, they are leaking like crazy. Ugh. These things don't seem to be on really tight either. That's the thing. Man. Okay. Okay, unlike the Bruiser, this is a shaft that goes all the way through the drive shaft here instead of just being just a little tiny grub screw, so that whole thing needs to come out. Okay, so that's the front. We're going to take these out, we're going to replace these, and I have tie rods that we're going to drill a hole right here, and we're going to just fit a tie rod between here and here. It'll look better, it'll perform better as well. So Okay, there's just oil everywhere from the shocks. I think that they leaked so much. All right. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to clean up some of this oily mess. You can also see, look, this, I don't know if I can get this to be picked up, but that on my finger is chrome plating from the drive shaft. So that's how cheap this stuff is, just so you're aware. Okay, so it's a bit messy on the underside because there's just a lot of oily mess here, and I'm assuming it's from the shocks because the shocks don't seem to have any oil in them, and I imagine they did at some point. So I'm going to clean this up with alcohol, just so we don't have a big mess to work with, and then we'll attack each of the axles and start taking some leaf springs off. Okay, so I cleaned these up a little bit. Man, they were just full of oil. They still are. I don't know how much this chrome here is going to last without starting to peel. This is really cheap stuff, but you get what you pay for. So shouldn't really be complaining, but just pointing it out that it's really cheap stuff. So first things first, this is the front, this is the rear. I'm going to take a short spring off the front and the middle spring off the rear, and I'm going to replace the things that hold the shocks here, these leaf spring, with aluminum. So let's just take this out as well, so at least I can clean this up a little bit more. It is pretty bad. Yeah, this is not high quality, that's for sure. There's rough edges. The chrome plating is pretty darn poor as well. So just be aware, you get what you pay for, like I said, but it'll still be functional. So let's start with this spring here. Okay, so I wanted to move the camera to give you a little bit of a better shot of what I'm doing here. Again, there's oil just everywhere. So I said we're going to take out the middle shackle on this. I'm sorry, the shorter shackle on this. This is the front. So I'm going to take out this first one on the bottom here. And look, the paint's already peeling off because of the oil. Again, it's just, you know, low quality. It's all over my fingers. Okay, before I put this back on, I'm going to do the other side as well, because I want to make sure that the springs both have the same bow to them. Otherwise, one side's going to be more lopsided than the other.
Got to remember also that these little tiny nuts here go on to the inside because they need enough spacing for this thing to bolt onto it. If you used these nylocks here, it's not going to have enough height on the thread to be able to bolt that on. Okay, yeah, you see how this one here is, God, that oil just attracts everything. They're not exactly, they don't exactly have the same bow, so that's what we're going to do here, is just kind of bring them both back up to symmetry. Okay, that's pretty close. All right, so you have those lined up, and then these two smaller ones. Yeah, way off. Look at that. I think it should be the flatter one that we're after. Okay, they both line up pretty well. So I think we can now put these back. What I think I'm going to do while I'm at it here is I'm going to move this to the other sides, because I'm moving the steering servo in the front, and I'm going to want the rod to push the steering this way instead of pointing to the back. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to move the front shocks to the back to give it the clearance that it needs. So let's do that. Okay, so this way we have the servo mounted in the front, and then it'll pivot this on this side instead of going to the back that way. So that way we're prepared for that. Actually, I recalled that the AmPro front servo mount came with a steering, I don't know what you call this thing, a steering arm, whatchamacallit. Anyways, it's a little bit longer. I think that if we mount the front servo, it would angle this way. So I'm going to go ahead and mount this one instead, because it's just got a little bit more length, which means the steering servo would be able to push it a little more cleanly this way. So let's just do that instead. See what happens. Alrighty. So now we can put the leaf springs on. Make sure I get these on right. One doesn't have a backing and the other one does, so I'm pretty darn sure that it goes like this. Okay. Wow, that took a little bit of adjustment. Okay, so finally, that's the front. Steering servo will go here. It'll move this. We took a one leaf off of this, so that's a good thing. This could use just a little bit better lining up here. All right, that's good enough. All right, that's the front. So now let's tackle the back. So I think the rear will be a little simpler. So on the rear, we're going to take the middle one out, okay? Okay, this is pretty gnarly. Look at that. So you're gonna have to do a little finagling to get that one back into shape. That's pretty bad. I don't know what the heck they were doing with this truck, but here we go. All right, those are pretty decent. And those are perfect, so we're good to go. Okay. I think we're good to go there now. So now let's see about putting these back on the chassis here. And I'm going to try a different set of shocks here. These have different stiffness, different springs for the stiffness. And these are 80 millimeters. I should get 100 if I want to have a lot more articulation. So these are still out to the to the jury. We'll see what develops with those, but they'll be easy to replace once you see what we're going to do, because we're going to be putting these shock mounts on the front and on the rear. So let's start by removing the shock mounts that are there right now. We're also going to be getting rid of this because we're not going to use the rear rod for our steering any longer. Okay, I think we're going to have to go ahead and take that. That's the front servo mount. So let's start attacking this, shall we? We need to separate the chassis sides a little bit to get this out, so we gotta start loosening some screws here. So just FYI, this Ampro front servo mount here, I took a 3mm tap to it, because otherwise, if you try to screw the 3mm screws into the ABS or PLA, whichever type of plastic it is, it might crack it. So, from the strain. So you want to tap the 3mm holes. Should have probably painted it black or 3D printed it myself in black, but oh well, it's all right. Can always spray it black anyway, since there's so many flakes on this black paint that's on the chassis right now. So all right. So once we have that servo in place, these are going to have to be bent in to make room for that servo. Okay. Let's go ahead and put the axles on next before we put the shock mounts, because I want to see how this is going to work for us. There's that. Okay. Need to tighten up these shackles, but still not convinced that these screws are long enough. But those are the ones we took out, so. Okay, so that's the front. Let's go to the back now. So for the rear, remember we had a real issue with this shaft here. So let's put the shaft on first. I'm checking the bearings. They were telling me that the bearings on this kit suck. So we don't plan on running it, so it doesn't really matter too much to us, but you may want to check the bearings on your kit and make sure they're not open bearings. You want sealed bearings. Oh, now I remember. So we needed to lower the case in order to get the screw through here. But, you know, if we do it this way, I don't have to worry about getting the screw through there, because I can just put a nut over there on the other side. And I think that has enough clearance. These were holding the shafts that come here, but we're going to do a little something different. Okay, the radio box. I tightened up the radio box. And it looks like those nuts cleared the box. So, all right, on the Bruiser, I don't think it would have done that. Okay, so now here's the thing. We're going to move the placement of the shocks, because what we're going to do here is we're going to take a rod. Let's find one of the right length here. I'm going to place it here, and it's got to go to here. Actually, on the inside. And it looks like that's the rod right there. So it's the longest of these, I believe. Yeah. So these rods are going to go here like this. And I may need a little spacer for them. Okay, so that's what's going to happen. I'm going to go like that. Yeah, and I don't think I'm going to need a spacer for them, so awesome. What I am going to need though is the right length screw for them, so I'll go take a look at that. In the meantime, since we know the rod's going to go here, that means the shock is going to go on the back there. So if the shock goes on the back here, we can put the shock mount. We can move this or move it or put the shock mount here. So this front over here, I can put a shock here as well, because I can have a screw coming on both sides to hold that, but I think it's just as fine to have this going like this, and I just need a little spacer, which I have, 3mm spacers, and the shock for the back. We can put it on this lower one, and that'll kind of push that up. Either that, or I'd have to get a 100mm shock and come up a bit, you know, to push this down some more, but I think this would do it right here where it's at. Okay, so I need 3mm spacers and longer screws and longer screws. Okay, so let's do that. Okay, I think I got this. For this side, we're gonna need a 10mm screw here. Okay, so now the shock. What I'm going to do is mount the shock on the back side here. So let's start with that. Okay, so I have that, and then we're going to mount it on this, on the lower one. don't know if that screw's long enough. You have to get a little bit longer than that. Okay. That's that side. Let's do this side next. Okay. That's the rear. Hopefully we won't have to move those shocks again. If it's too high, we're gonna have to move it again, but that looks pretty good. So now let's do the front. Okay, so the front, what did I say we were going to do the front? Move it to the back, right? I mean, technically, I could keep it where it was at in the front because this steering one is aftermarket and they pushed it out. That's probably why it was lengthened in order to keep this in the front. But we can always move it to the back. Yeah, I say we put the shock in the front like it's supposed to be. So let's start with that. Okay. I don't want to mess around with these holes here, so we're going to end up drilling out these holes here instead, I think. Let me do that. Okay, so what I did off camera was I mounted this shock mount. There was already an existing hole here, and I drilled a hole here and tapped it with a 3mm tap. So I did the same thing on the other side. There was already a hole here that was already tapped, and so I drilled another hole here and tapped that with a 3mm tap. So what I have now are basically two solid shock mounts on here. So we can go ahead and put a 3mm spacer here. And we'll put it on the bottom. So it looks like the shock is barely clearing this screw, the screw head that's right here. So should be good enough. We'll do the same on the other side now. Okay. So I think that does it. We might change those shocks out, like I said, for 100mm shocks. But for now, I think we're good as is. And it's obviously going to be easy to change the shocks out, you know. So what we need is the servo, and to make sure we have the right length tie rod for that. See what we got going on in here. Okay, got the receiver and the ESC. So we're going to open up the bottom, and we're going to take out that that steering servo that we don't need anymore with that long rod. Quite honestly, we don't really even need the radio box, but we'll leave it on there anyways. So let's see what we've got here. We take this out. Hopefully this will come out without having to take out the whole radio box. We'll see. On the Bruiser, you had to take out the whole radio box. On this guy, I'm hoping it's a little bit different. Yeah, nice. Okay, so we're going to take this servo out here. That's not necessary anymore. What we're going to need is, we're going to probably need a small extension cable for the front servo, since I doubt the wire is going to be long enough. Okay. Let's find which wire. It's the servo saver. Okay, looks like that's channel 1. Yeah, see, the wiring for the front isn't going to, so we're going to need a, we'll go order a better servo for one, and then we'll also order an extension. Okay, now we're set. We just need to order a servo, an extension cable, and that'll do it for the chassis. Let's see what we're going to do with the body, but like I say, as far as the chassis is concerned, this thing looks done. Okay. Got new shocks, no leaks, because these aren't oil shocks. They have real nice. So the one thing that we do need to do still, almost forgot, was putting these tie rods here. Again, I'm going to put it here and here, just like this. So that's the only thing that's left to do with respect to the chassis. Okay, so there you have it. Okay, so I went ahead and turn it this way. Drilled and tapped a 3mm. Well, you don't drill a 3mm hole, but it's like 2.5 or whatever it is. But drilled a hole, tapped it for a 3mm screw. Also, if you use these aluminum spring leaf holders, whatever you want to call them, know that they're only tapped about halfway through. So you should put a little bit of oil on your 3mm tap and just finish the job and go all the way, because we're going to screw the rod end on this side. So anyways, a little oil on your 3mm tap, you could just tap it by hand. It's aluminum, so it's soft, so it's not going to be a struggle for you. So let's go ahead and put these braces in here. And I would suggest that you put Loctite on these, because you're screwing in a stainless steel screw into aluminum, and with a lot of vibration, this is just going to vibrate off. I'm not doing it only because I don't plan on really running this, so. Okay, so now you've got these two braces here. No binding, so that should take care of that. And we'll see what we're going to do next here. Okay, what I think we're going to do next is go ahead and just mount the front servo. Went through my spare parts bins, and I found old school. This is what we used on the clodbusters. It's a very strong Metal Gear bearing servo here. These are the thing back in the day. Don't know if this is going to fit for the steering arm or not, but we'll figure it out. And we have a servo saver. So let's see how we're going to do this. First and foremost, I think this, going all the way over there, the servo horn is going to have to be all the way on this side. So let's start there.
No, that's probably the same size, but just in case. Ah, look at that. This is about 20 years old, so let's get a new rod end for that. Wow. Maybe these are the wrong rod ends to use for this. Get the Kyosho ones. Or we can put these in their place as well. And there you go. That tie rod, that steering tie rod ended up working out really, really well. You can see it's pretty straight, and if that's the center, regardless of whether, you know, we can always adjust it later, but that is perfect. Nice. So, pretty much finished the front. The servo's on there really nice and snug and tight. So, I think we're done as far as the chassis is concerned. Still, that was crazy. So let me clean this up, and I've already ordered the extension for this, so you should be able to route it to the back pretty nicely. And let's attack the body next.